Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining Transition US with Vicki Robin today for this online event. And our main aim in providing these teleseminars is to support leaders of transition initiatives, those who are mulling over starting an initiative, and community leaders everywhere that are working on resilience building within their communities. And we want to continue to offer these teleseminars at no cost, but do ask that you consider making a donation at transitionus.org. And thank you so much in advance for those of you who are able to do this. So, without further ado, I wanted to introduce our guest today, Vicki Robin, who will be talking about the 10-day local food challenge and the launch of it. And she'll be presenting for about 45 minutes. Then we'll take some questions and answers, and there'll be some comments and time to do a little sharing amidst the presentation as well. And Vicki has written a new book called Blessing the Hands That Feed Us, and it's really about this. It's about her 10-day, her food challenge, eating locally. So, Vicki, without further ado, I know you've got a lot of information to share, and I'm going to thank you for joining us and turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be with you, and thank you so much, Caroline and Transition US, for hosting this call with those of you who are on the call, and hopefully many, many more who will be listening to this recording as they think about whether they want to do a 10-day local food challenge. As Caroline said, I'm author of a new book called Blessing the Hands That Feed Us, What Eating Closer to Home Can Teach Us About Food, Community, and Our Place on Earth. Our agenda for today is going to be, we're going to do some introductions. I'll do some introductions about this 10-day local food challenge. I'll have you guys introduce yourselves. And we have a limited time, so I'm going to ask you to share airtime very consciously. And then I'm going to go over like the elements of the challenge and why I chose 10 days and why we chose 100 miles, et cetera. So you really get grounded in what this is about. And then we'll have plenty of time for question and answer or discussion or challenges or whatever you want to talk about. So I want to start out with actually why I did this. And in the PDF of the slideshow, there's a lot of slides explaining this. I am presuming that many of the people on this call are well grounded in the information about the condition of our food system and the contribution of agriculture to climate change and other issues. But I'm just going to run through it in case there's some people listening who haven't really thought about this. And so for me, what happened was I have been living for actually about 25 years with the knowledge that we're an overshoot, that we're using more of the planet every year than the planet can afford, that we are drawing down the fundamental renewable resources as well as non-renewable resources of the earth. And we really, the task of our time is to learn to live well together within the means of the earth, which is very much what Transition Town people are all about. When I started our own transition initiative here on Whidbey Island, I asked a local farmer if we here on Whidbey could actually survive on what we grow here. Whidbey Island is a 45-mile-long island. It's semi-rural. You drive up the island, and you would presume that we have a very active and rich agriculture and that we could do this. We could feed ourselves. So she did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation about the number of people on the island and the land that's zoned in agriculture that's still available for agriculture, and 2,000 calories a day, and said, yes, we could survive here on the island that's serviced by a ferry to the south and a very narrow bridge and an earthquake zone to the north. We could do that for about 2 weeks in August. And for me, that set me on a passionate path to figure out, to learn, to live into the question of how do we feed ourselves? How do we feed ourselves here, and how do people in an era of climate change and resource depletion, how will the people of this earth feed themselves as time goes on? And then in my research, I found out statistics that also motivated me. For example, there's 3 days of food in our grocery stores. Our grocery stores are the endpoint of an industrial food system. Anybody who's tried to get local food into their large-scale grocery store, their corporate grocery store, understands that it's very hard for the grocery store system, which is an industrial system, to dock with our local food systems. So it's the endpoint of an industrial system, and if the shelves stopped getting stocked, in fact, they would get emptied in approximately 3 days. Now maybe, some like high-end mustard would be left, or, I don't know, but, white vinegar. But basically, the store, we think about where's the food, and we think the food's in the store, but it's not in the store. It's flowing through the store. And we know that, whenever we see, on the TV news, like reports of disasters, we first see the disaster and people suffering. And then usually there's a shot of the grocery stores, and they've been emptied. So that was a wake-up call for me. Another thing I learned is the average age of a farmer in the United States is between 57 and 58 years old. There's 5 farmers over 75 for every 1 farmer under 25. There's deeper issues behind that too, which is that many farmers, these farmers over 75 or even, in their 60s are aging out of farming. They don't have the bodies for it anymore, but our economic system makes it very difficult to transfer the land economically so the farmer can harvest his last crop, which would be money, and a young person can afford to be on the land and own the land. So we are really in a farmer squeeze. 40% of our food is wasted, and that's not just in the first world, it's in the 2/3 world as well. In the industrialized nations, the food is wasted between the store and our garbage pails. In the 2/3 world, it's usually someplace wasted between the field and some distribution point. It rots in the field. So that's a lot of waste. And then there's, many of us know that there are many people, according to some estimates, almost 80 million people in the United States are obese, officially obese, and almost 50 million people are food insecure. So there's something wacky with our food system. And I'm guessing that I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And all of this data is on the PDF that Caroline sent out to everybody on the call, and that's also posted on the website. And then there's every minute of every day, there's an acre of farmland being lost to development. So we actually are losing farmers. And when I say farmers, it's not necessarily the mega farms, the ultra large scale farms. It's what's termed by the USDA a small scale farm, which is anywhere from $1,000 a year farm income to $250,000 a year farm income. Usually these are diverse farms with, and sometimes integrated livestock and fruits and vegetables, but maybe 2 or 3 crops. So we're losing farmers, we're losing farmland. So we arrive at this day when I had just finished I'm a sport eater, and when I just finished one of my mega diets, and I'd lost a bunch of weight, and I was at a 4th of July party, and it was a table full of potluck food, and I was just about to dig in when a friend of mine who's a farmer came over and asked me if I would be willing to do an experiment, and would I be willing to eat only what she could produce for a month. And she actually wasn't willing to do it. Her husband wasn't willing to do it because she was very curious, like how serious is my farming operation. She'd asked quite a few people. Nobody was willing, but I call sustainability an extreme sport, so I took it on. And I said, yes, I'll do this. But we realized that she didn't have anything that looked like protein to me, no milk, cheese, meat, certainly no almonds or soybeans. There was nothing that looked like protein. So we agreed that since she lived within 10 miles of my home, we would call it a 10-mile diet, and I could go on a hunt for food within those 10 miles. And I did the challenge, this first local food challenge, in September 2010. And I blogged about it every day. That was my exchange. She brought me food, and I blogged, and I fell into this study of our food systems, food, nourishment, obesity. I mean, I've just discovered that food is the nexus. I mean, everything comes down to the dinner table in a way. You know, all the issues that we care about have a component that's about food and agriculture. So by the end of the month, I was really passionate about it, and I sent, basically I wrote a book proposal, and within a month and a half of finishing the diet, I had a contract to write the book, which is Blessing the Hands That Feed Us, which came out in January. So I've toured, you know, and people are interested, and it's curious, and it's a funny story about Vicki. But I realized I was being asked by people to provide some how-to or some like, okay, so what's it to me, or how do I do this, or some guidance for people. And it came to me this summer, not long ago, that I could host a 10-day local food challenge. So that's what we're going to talk about here, what the 10-day local food challenge is. And I'm finding as I share it with people, we just launched about 2.5 weeks ago, and we already have people signing up and curious about it. I'm finding that the idea is kind of sticky. You know, it's like it gets people's attention, and you can see the wheels start turning in their head. So I'm excited to see how this is going to work. And a little later in the call, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how this is a pilot, and next year it might actually go quite big. So those of you who choose to do it this year wholeheartedly will actually be sort of the guinea pigs for how does the challenge work, and also how does this work for understanding the state of our local food systems or our regional food systems. So now I want to talk about why I'm calling it a challenge, and why I call it the 10-Day Local Food Challenge, why it's going to become a campaign. And so a challenge, I like challenge because it's challenging. You know, this is it wasn't easy to do my 10-mile diet. It took a lot of concentration, and it took a lot of confrontation with my, you know, inner sport eater. And it took a lot of confrontation with my food psychology, my food habits, and the demands that I made, and the unconsciousness, and it threw me back into my capacity to cook, and not really even knowing what to do with some of the vegetables that Tricia brought me. So there was so much that I learned, and there was a day too, and Caroline was actually around for it, where during my 10-mile month, there was a regional meeting for transition groups in Bellingham, Washington, which was beyond my 10 miles. So I arrived at this meeting with like suitcases full of food, you know. So there was also the challenge of how do I move about in the world, you know, how do I not be trapped in my little 10 miles. So it was really, it really took something to do this. It was one thing to think about it, and it was another thing to do it. So it is challenging, and I'm really wanting to challenge people to, at very least, to think about how they eat and whether eating more locally has any benefit for them, even if they don't do the actual experiment. But I want to challenge people who are willing, and I'm hoping that it's not only just people like y'all who are on the call, but it's also, you know, that next ring out, the people you know who are sort of standing curiously on the bystanding, who are looking in through the shop window at all of us crazies who are trying to do this. I'm hoping we can attract a few of those people in too, to actually run the experiment. And you know, we really shouldn't categorize people. Who knows who's going to do this? Really, who knows? So a challenge, I think of it like it's, as I say, it's an extreme sport. You know, I think of it like a 10K race. You know, maybe or a marathon. I don't think this is a marathon. I think it's like a 10K race, because you mean to do something, but when you're doing it alone, you may not pony up the energy. You may not, if nobody's watching and if nobody's holding you accountable, you may or may not do it. But like a 10K race actually gets everybody training because it's a social event. So I think the idea that there's going to be a lot of people actually around the world, because we already have people in Tasmania and Nova Scotia and the United States, there'll be people around the world who are doing this alongside you. It provides some accountability, and it sort of sets the bar high and keeps that bar in view. Or it's a little bit like Lent. You know, it's like a Lenten practice, or, you know, some sort of fast in service to a value that you have or a spiritual ideal. Actually is a time out of time for you to really take a look at your behavior and to do it religiously, such that you actually get the learning. It's not, you know, I'm inviting people to go from casual to, you know, at least for a small period of time, you know, intensely accepting the boundary that this challenge offers. Or it's like going on a diet, you know. I mean, it's like people know, you know, some people will develop good eating habits after many years of yo-yo dieting. But, you know, you take on the South Beach diet or the this diet or the that diet. You take on a limited period of time of changing your behavior radically in service to a desired outcome for your body. So that's why I call it a challenge. I think that it fits it as a challenge. And why am I calling it a campaign? I think it's a campaign because I think that social change, there's a first part of it is awareness building. Like there's a problem and there's an opportunity, and there's a lot of awareness building that needs to happen about the state of our global industrial corporate agricultural system. And it's way beyond, for me, it's way beyond protesting about GMOs. That is sort of a pinpoint that's bringing people into awareness, but it's much more than that. And I really want to have people see that much more, the systemic problems with how we feed ourselves, even the most dedicated communities. Now, I'm sure it's not yours in Sebastopol or someplace else, but I mean, I was in Corvallis, Oregon, that has set a goal of 20% of their food by 2020 coming from a 6-county region. Now, that's like audacious and bodacious, but their measurement at the moment is that 7% of their food comes from a 6-county region, even with all of their awareness building. So I think we need an awareness-raising campaign, so that it's a little bit like with transition. You know, you spend time with awareness raising, then it builds a desire in people to do something about it. And the 10-day local food challenge is not only awareness building, but it's an engagement process. It takes you from armchair, watching it scroll across your computer screen, meaning to do something, blah, blah, into an actual engagement. And I guarantee you, sort of, because it happened to me, that once you make a commitment to this and you start hunting for food, it will change you. That engagement actually brings you to the awareness that I had at the end of the challenge, is that local food, like the cool stuff we get in the farmer's market, is not a local food system, that the entire middle guts of our food systems have been disassembled because the global food system is taken over for a variety of, you know, logical and maybe sometimes nefarious reasons. And that we have a big job ahead of us of rebuilding our regional food systems. And so hopefully, once the engagement is done, people will want to act. And I'm hoping that the research that we do with this 10-day local food challenge will produce some collective, reporting statistics about what's working and what isn't in our local food systems, because all of you will be reporters for your food system. And so then I hope that together, the challengers, as I'm starting to call us, will start to look at those statistics and say, okay, is there an action that we could collectively get behind, you know, for the next stage of this journey? So a campaign is about that. A campaign takes you from awareness to engagement, to action. And so I think that eater activation is really what this is about. So on to why 10 days. And basically, it's a doable stretch. You know, I mean, if you said we're going to do a month, I think most people would glaze over. If you say you're going to do a day, you know, well, I'll try. Maybe, but I think a 10-day challenge actually is I like the number 10 anyway, but I think it's a doable stretch. And it actually can be, it's in the month of October. That's the time period during which we're going to be doing this campaign, this local food challenge. And so you can pick 10 consecutive days. You could pick, if you have a trip in the middle, you could pick 5 days here and 5 days there. People can, that seems more doable than asking for 30 days. And sometimes people are on a trip, so if you said it was the first 10 days of October, you'd lose some people. And then why 100 miles? And first of all, I think the 100-mile diet is resonant. It's like in 2007, a book came out about a couple in Vancouver who had done a year of 100-mile eating. And that sort of started to launch, that and a few other leaders launched this locavore movement, if you will. And communities started, you know, were dotted around that were trying to replicate that 100-mile diet. So it has a resonance in the culture. The term has been around for a while. It's recognizable. I think also 100 miles defines a region. And one of the tools that's on the website for the 10-day local food challenge, which is localfoodchallenge.org, you go to the website, and in the how-to section, there's a tool there called Radius. And it actually is a tool that will generate a 100-mile or however much distance radius from a point that you designate. So when I did that in, you know, for Langley, Washington, where I live, I basically get west of the Cascades in Washington, plus, you know, over to Vancouver Island. And so that's a pretty good eating region. You know, that is a bioregional region. It has a certain climatic and soil integrity, and it has a cultural integrity. It has a seasonal integrity, and it's got a lot of food. So, you know, you look at those 100 miles and you say, oh, well, geez, this should be doable. And in the PDF of the PowerPoint that you got from Caroline or that's on the website, you'll see I did one of those maps, the radius maps for New York City, and you will see how far, you know, you'll see that that is the food system, really, the fresh food system, in large measure that feeds into New York City for all the focus on relatively local food. So you'll see that, and there's been a study in MIT, you know, that Michael Pollan was involved in, that was really saying regional food systems are possible, and it's a really decent focus for how we're going to reshape our food system. And it's also relational because 100 miles defines a radius where it's really possible for you to go to the farm. It's really possible for you to know the farmer. It's really possible for you to have a felt sense that this person is part of your life, that I eat by the good grace of this farmer who's producing food. It takes it out of the anonymous, you know, anywhere, anytime, anything eating in the food court called the industrial food system and puts it into what I call relational eating. So that's why 100 miles. And why I'm offering people the opportunity to have 10 exotics, foods from afar that you can't live without. So why 10 exotics? Well, as soon as I tell people they can have 10 exotics, you know, I can just feel them relax. Like, oh, thank God, I don't have to give up coffee or salt. So it actually relaxes people into thinking, oh, I could do this. And it reduces the fear of an extreme sport. and increases acceptance. And I also watch people's wheels turn. It actually initiates the process of thinking, what do I eat on a daily basis? Where are my food addictions? What must I have? And realizing that you can have those few things that you must have, like salt and oil. And some people say, and the first thing people say when I give talks is, oh, chocolate. So if you can have those things, you figure, I could do the rest of this. And it's actually a pretty ample number. I had 4 exotics on my 10-mile diet, and because I had olive oil, in terms of calories, I got almost a half of my calories just from that quart of olive oil that I fundamentally drank in the month. So that's the idea. For 10 days in October, eat foods produced within 100 miles of your home, and you can have 10 exotics to foods from afar that you can't live without. Basic thing. People say, well, if it's assembled in my 100 miles, but the ingredients come from afar, or what if my CSA that delivers to me in New York City comes from 200 miles, or there's all these what ifs. And so, or what if I travel during the month? Can I still do it? Or what if I have a special diet? What if I'm a vegan? And I can't get enough of the kind of protein. Well, I say just put almonds and soy milk or whatever it is that you get your protein from. Put that in your exotics. And then a big one is, well, what about food deserts? What about people who who can't even find food in their neighborhood, whatever kind of food? And I say, when somebody brought that up, I said, that's an important piece of information. It's okay to sign up for this and fail, to make a good faith effort and not be able to do it. That's really good information, because we need to know why this is beyond reach for people in income brackets or different geographies. And also, you can just make it 200 miles. 100 miles isn't like a holy grail. If you need to say, I need a 200-mile radius for me to make this work, that's fine. This is not rigid. If you can go for more than 10 days, great. If you can only do it for a week, great. If you can do it for a weekend, just you set the parameters like you do for Lent, and then you do it. So I've talked for quite a bit right now, and I'd like to take a couple of minutes for any questions that are arising for people. And then after that, I would like to take, now that we have everybody on the call, I'd like to do a little bit of a roll call so we know who's on the call. So first of all, press 1 on your keypad if you have a question coming up about what I've said so far, about the basic structure of the challenge. So does anybody have a question or brief observation? And if not, I'm just going to keep moving along. Okay.
There is one, Vicki. Let's go to Bob Daniel.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the connection here. I think that number of beeps is because people are pressing their one button, and that makes a little beep. My observation is that I live in Marin County near the coast, like a lot of people in this area, so this also includes seafood in addition to farms. Just an interesting sidelight on that. Secondly, I'd like to know if there will be a follow-up whereby we could log in somewhere and watch the people's experience as they accumulate it. Go back to you.
Well, perfect question, Bob. That will take us into the next segment. And yes, there will be lots of ways to see how it's going for people. So I'll get to that in a minute.
So Ron Metcalf, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, does the challenge start in October, or is it already started? I'm confused about that.
Yes, the basic challenge people period is October. This period of time now is really outreach and telling people about the challenge and letting people start to think about, ooh, I've got to stock up on food. I better go to the farmer's market next Saturday and, you know, buy my onions and potatoes and field beans or whatever it is you're going to buy, or squash, or, you know. So this is the period of time when you're getting prepared mentally and getting prepared, you know, stocking your larder. That's why we started in September, to give people a little runway to get themselves ready. And do you want to try Annabelle again?
Yes, exactly. Go ahead, Annabelle.
Okay, I'm here. Okay, I'm wondering if you have a limited diet due to food intolerances, celiac, or something like that. Are there any ideas for tweaking that? Because there are things that I need that are like potatoes, for instance. I don't even know if potatoes grow in my radius or not. So my exotic list got a little bit big, and it was things like that. It wasn't sugar and coffee. It was potatoes and milk. Because I need to eat those things because that's all I have.
Yeah, I actually don't know how that's going to work. I think that somebody with celiac disease or other conditions where they have dietary limitations are going to be our researchers in this project about people with dietary limitations. So thanks for the question. And the fact of the matter is I don't have answers. We're going to get answers together. So as I say, anybody with any sorts of limitations, whether there's, food deserts or dietary limitations, please just, sign up, make a good faith effort, and let us know what happened. And we're going to learn together. So thanks for the question. And we have Mary.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just one observation that I have become aware of just in the few days that I was contemplating all this is regarding the 10 exotics. And I'm wondering if maybe it would be helpful to also look at not just the 10 exotics, but what percentage of a person's food consumption comes from the 10 exotics. For instance, maybe my 10 exotics is simply 10% of my food consumption, or maybe my 10 exotics are 50% of my food consumption. Does that observation make sense? Am I explaining that?
It totally makes sense. And as I'll say in the second part of this, we're going to do surveys, and I think before and after, and particularly the after survey is going to give us a lot of information. And so we might be able to ask, maybe we can even suggest that people track their food. Like, I am not promoting my book, but if you read my book, you'll see that I actually tallied everything I eat. And that's, down to the green bean. And I knew because it was, every bite was crucial to me. And as I say, I found out that in terms of calories, my olive oil was almost 50% of the calories. But it certainly wasn't 50% of the nourishment, and it wasn't 50% of the belly-filling food. So I think it's a great idea is to, basically what you get to do, one of the things you do is if you want to do the challenge, or even if you want to just watch other people doing the challenge, if you want to get the updates on the challenge, you go on the 10-day local food challenge, the localfoodchallenge.org website, and sign up for the email list, because starting in October, that's who's going to get emails about this. I think in one of the emails, I will make that suggestion that you figure out how to track your food, whether it's calories or quantities, and so that we can find out what percentage of our food must come from afar for us to be happy campers. So thank you for that. So we're going to go on and talk about the other elements of the 10-day local food challenge, the tools that we've developed, the little team that's put this together. So one is, somebody asked about the research. And there's going to be surveys that you take before the challenge, and it gives us a baseline of who's doing it and what the zip code. So you're asked for your zip code. So like who's doing it where. So we have a little map of where it's happening. It's also, sort of like doing the survey is a ritual of commitment also. Once you've done the survey, you'll probably think, oh, now I've really got to do it. And what your diet is currently and how easy or hard you imagine this is going to be, and any comments you want to make about who you are or what your relationship with food is or whatever you want to say about yourself. So that gets us, that's how we know who's doing what where. Then after the challenge is over, there'll be a follow-up survey, and that's really where the action's going to be, besides the fact that we're all going to do this, is that we're going to ask a lot of questions to, number one, find out if this 10-day local food challenge actually helps draw in, deepen the commitment of people who are already committed to eating locally, but also draws in the next circle out. Is this idea of a 10-day local food challenge a really good tool for all of us who care about this to build out the number of eaters who are paying attention? And then also we want to know about the state of our local food systems. We'll hear from people all over the country and all over the world about what's easy in your region. What do you have, and celebrate what we have, but also we'll be noticing what's missing that if it were there would make a difference. And this is super important in terms of, this is sort of a grassroots mapping of our food systems, because the things that are missing or the things that were really hard, like that you couldn't get transportation, or the farmer's market was closed for the season, or what are the things that, what are the barriers that you ran into? And so we'll find out what those barriers are. And we're going to document also the innovations, and I'm very interested in this because I'm involved in my own community here on Whidbey Island in a number of innovations that I'm super excited about, but I'm not going to go on and on about. But as I travel and speak and listen, I'm finding out that people in other communities are noticing what I'm noticing, that there's a barrier of convenience, there's a barrier of cost, there's a barrier of cooking, not knowing how to cook, and they're solving for these barriers of canning, processing and packaging, and commercial kitchens, co-pack plants. And people are starting to notice what's missing in their communities, and they're starting to take action, either as small little nonprofit groups or getting government grants or changing some laws and ordinances. So I really think that we can collectively document the emergence of this sort of the food system in the middle, between farm and fork. There's a whole bunch of stuff about getting the food from A to Z, or A to M, like your mouth. And so I'm hoping that when we look at the results together, we'll say, okay, this is an issue we want to work on, and we can work collectively in learning together and also making change. So that's what the surveys are for. There's also a Facebook group. There's a Facebook page that you can like, and that's going to be a place where I and other people are going to be posting interesting stories and resources, so we're going to start to build up a knowledge base. And there's a Facebook group, and don't worry about the links for these things, because when you go to the website, they're all there. There's going to be a Facebook group where I'm hoping everybody does a challenge, says, hi, I'm Annabelle, and I'm from Sonoma or Sebastopol, and I'm doing the challenge in these 10 days, and people will post pictures of their the farm stands or the farmer's market, or like that horrible thing we all do of taking pictures of our dinner. And maybe people will post recipes and challenges and solutions, and it will be a place where we will develop collectively answers to a lot of questions, and also have a lot of fun and learn a lot. So that's the group. And there is a website that I discovered as I did my research about. I wanted to provide people with some websites I could find that would help them find their local sources. And I stumbled on a website called agrilicious.org, which I love the name, Agrilicious. It seemed to be a website that was trying to aggregate a lot of knowledge about local food and promote local food. And they have a food finder, and you say, within 100 miles of my home, where can I find local food? And they have guaranteed that if you need something that you can't find, they will, within 24 hours, find it for you. So I am going to partner. These are the people I'm going to partner with next year to take this way bigger than our pilot program this year. So Agrilicious is listed on our website, but also there's a few other websites that are curated where people are trying to aggregate knowledge about where the farmers markets are and farm stands and restaurants, et cetera, that have local food. And also just to say that Google is your friend, because you just type in, farm stands near Langley, Washington, and you'll find stuff. So, the hunt for food is going to be challenging, but these tools hopefully will make it a bit easier. So on the website, I just want to talk a little bit about localfoodchallenge.org, the website. And there's information, there's some slide screenshots on your PDF of the PowerPoint that you got either before this call or you will get when you download this recording. And on the home page, it's very clear, unambiguous. There's a button to sign up. There's a list of the different pages, things that you can find, the how-to, etc. And it's like a very brief description on the home page of what this challenge is. So you can send that link to your friends and have them, you can get it explained yourself, but also it's a very easy way to explain it to other people. There's a page called How To with a lot of suggestions about how to find food and how to think about doing the challenge. There's a page with resources. There's sort of tweets that are composed that if you're a tweeter, you can use those. There's a whole bunch of these lovely pictures with some quotes on them that you can use on your Facebook posts if you want to use those. People love these pictures with quotes on them. So, and then there's also PDFs of if you want to print business cards, because you want to pass them out in your community. If you want to print little flyers or big flyers, there's a flyer there with a blank space so that if you want to, and when you can actually put your local information in there. So if you want to have an event or a potluck or something in your community, you have a poster. So we try to provide not too many resources, but resources that make it really easy for you to share it with others. And so those are the resources that we've developed, and if you guys develop more resources, then that will show up in our Facebook group so that we develop this rich intelligence together. Finally, there's some variations of this that I've been thinking up, and I'm sure you will think up others. One is, and I heard somebody say it, to do it as a group. I think that's great. There's something about local food that's relational, and so it's great to not just, soldier on by yourself, but see if you can get a few friends to do it with you. It'll be easier to find food. You can have cooking parties. You can share garden produce, and you actually, as a group, become way more visible in your community. And it's a little bit like the Pied Piper. People will want to try it out. You can adjust the number of days or the distance, as I said earlier. You can tailor it to how easy or hard you want to make it on yourself. And all tailoring is perfectly fine. There's another thing that I wanted to put up on the website, but it was just too complex to do it for the whole world. but there on the handout, there's a link to a video, a YouTube video, on how to put locations on a Google map. So you could create a Google map for your region. This would be like a fantastic resource for your region. As you hunt for food, if you set up this Google map and you set up a lot of people who are committed to the challenge to be administrators of the map, every time you find a farm stand or a farmer's market or a grocer who carries, the local lettuce or, universal kale, every time you find something, you can put a pin on the map. You can name that pin, like where it is, and you can even put a picture up, of the market or the farmer or the garden or whatever it is. So we can collaboratively create these maps for our areas. So as we're finding food, we're making it easier for other people to find food. I'd love to see people do that. And then there's, I heard somebody saying this, a few of you said, oh, I want to get like a lot of people into this, or I want to get my friends into this. And I've been thinking for myself that there might be people reluctant to do it, but I could host a local food potluck, a 100-mile diet potluck at a community center here, and that would be a way that a lot of people might even do like a one-day local food campaign where they actually get to come together and experience it. So there's women in my women's group who I think are going to get together and do it together. So I think, each one feed one would be one way to do it, that you take on to prepare a meal and invite people in so that they can have a taste of what you're doing. And it also could be each one teach one, that you find somebody who's reluctant and you see if you can't buddy up with them and do it together so that we're actually reaching further. So I'd like to I am done with what I wanted to present. And so I'd like to open this up for suggestions, questions, comments, whatever you want to raise in the next 15 or so minutes. Anybody, just press 1 on your keypad if you want to ask something or comment or
we have Bob Daniel. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just curious to know if any of you folks have any info about how much land it takes to feed people. You mentioned, your question on Whidbey Island, I think it was. And if an entire city went, let's say 50,000 went local, how much land will that take? Does anybody know? I think it's an interesting speculation as time moves on and we get, hopefully, more localized.
That's a great question. I'd like to riff on it just briefly. I think it totally depends on the soils and the climate and what grows well. So I think that will be a regionally derived number. In Seattle, in King County, there's a food policy council that got together, and they actually did some research about could King County feed itself, and they determined the 27 fruits and vegetables that grow well in King County and the amount of agricultural land that isn't under Boeing, or isn't under the airport. So the amount of agricultural land, and if it were a command and control economy and farmers could be told what to grow. I mean, if there was some way we could control what owners of agricultural land chose to grow, actually King County could be totally 100% food. Oh, and if people were willing to eat what grows here, that's a big one. King County could be 100% food sufficient in terms of these 27 or 28 fruits and vegetables. And it could also be almost food sufficient if people would moderate their consumption in chicken, because chickens can cohabit gardens, same agricultural land. Not in meat, not in red meat by any stretch of the imagination. So that research has been done in King County. There was research done by the American Farmland Trust about the lands west of the Cascades. As you can tell, this is my region, so I'm more familiar. And they massaged some data. They collected data from a variety of research, and they came up with a figure of 25%. We could, if we would be willing to eat it and if people would be willing to farm it, et cetera, we could actually provide 25% of our food west of the Cascades already without actually too much fierce change. I think that number's high, but it's a great number. My perspective on this is that I don't think we want to do away with the industrial food system anytime soon. I mean, there may be some sort of, extreme circumstance that we're going to head into where it's going to collapse. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The industrial food system is brilliant at bringing us chocolate. It's brilliant at logistics. It's brilliant at responding to crises, where food needs to be transported to people in crises very quickly. So I think we need to appreciate the brilliance of the industrial food system. But considering that 10% local production for local consumption is a sort of a dream, a dream number at the moment, but let's say we could go from 10% to 20% by 2020, that would be terrific. I'm just thinking let's inch up on being able to at least provide 50% of our food regionally, and it's quite reasonable whether you think of it as 100 or 200 or 400 miles. USDA says 400 miles is local, and all us radicals think that's like a ridiculous number, but actually it's not that far away. It's a day's drive. So if you think of 50% of your food, like fruits and vegetables, very reasonable to have it be regionally produced. Dairy is quite reasonable in some places in the country. Chicken, quite reasonable. Eggs, quite reasonable. And it may be that grains need to come from further afield, or field beans, may be that. So you start to break down what do people actually eat. And you see that it's not unreasonable to think that we can do this. It's just that there's a lot of barriers to doing it. And whoever tries this is going to find out exactly what they are. So thanks for the question. It gave me an opportunity to say a lot of things. Anybody else want to raise their hand with a question or comment? I say press 1 on your keypad if you're going to actually do the challenge. Yay, okay, we have over 50%, well over, almost 60% are going to do the challenge. And probably some of you are still thinking about it. So that's great. And those of you who do it are going to be like the grassroots research team. And I'm so curious how this goes. So please go to localfoodchallenge.org, sign up to be on the email list so that you can get the updates. Do the survey so that we know who you are and where you are and when you're going to do it and what your exotics are going to be. Do the survey and then become a member of the Facebook group so that you can be in the conversation. And I say, let the good times roll. And thank you all so much for coming. Some old friends are on this call and new friends, and thank you very much for engaging with me on this interesting journey. Okay, we can, Caroline, you want to open up the microphones so people can all say goodbye?
And I wanted to first thank you, Vicki, for just all of your work in this field for the number of years that you've been doing this, really pioneering as you do so well, and sort of letting us all in on it. So I'm really, really excited, and Transition US will be certainly a participant and sponsor and help get the word out and share findings as well. So really looking forward to this journey. And just thank you and thank everyone on the call for stepping up into this. And without final ado, I'm just going to unmute everyone, and you can give a shout out to Vicki as we sign off, and I'll be sending you the link to the presentation soon.
And Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Vicki.
Bye, Vicki and Caroline.
Thank you.
Goodbye, and thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, both of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.